Thank you for your kind introduction. Let us listen to a short tune and take a walk in the woods. We are talking about perception and feeling and experience. So we do it just people in the Romantic era did, and we developed some kind of counter landscape. Music is the most romantic of all arts.
Das reicht.
I know. It would be nice to hear the complete piece. These are famous parts from the forest fairies, and we already are into this cultural black box which Romanticism gave us. It works in a way, and we find still today the space that protects us against stress, a counter world full of harmony, and we associate these attributes like peace, poetic impressions, spiritual, aesthetic impressions, but also the opposite, what I would like to talk about. And in 1948, we have reached the end point of this phase, which I would like to talk about, and which I would like to call the discovery of forests. So let's start here and take a retrospective look when a new belief in nature originates. O valleys wide, O heights, O beautiful green forest, thou attentive dwelling place of my joys and sorrows, outside, forever deceived, rages the busy world, embrace me for the last time with thy green ceiling. Joseph von Eichendorff is one of the most famous representatives for Romanticism, expresses this new perception of nature. The poem is called Farewell, that personifies the forest, describing how the natural landscape can become a spiritual home. In the forest is carved in silent, solemn words about acting and loving justly and what is right for man. Big expectations, so what moves Eichenberg and us still today when we think of forest, the Romanticism or the Romantic movement, as we heard, was a story of losses and longings, as Rüdiger Safranzi put it. One of the most recognized experts of this Romantic movement, Eichendorff, is a typical example. For financial reasons, he was forced to abandon his family estate in Upper Silesia and moved to Vienna and to Berlin, and he lost his home in nature. It was enormous pain that he addressed in his poetry. The poem is called Farewell. Who built you nice forest? I would to praise the master as long as I still have my voice. Farewell, farewell, thy beautiful forest. Deep the world, confused, and we move away and regret this 1,000 times. Farewell, farewell, beautiful forest. It was primarily intellectuals from cities who rediscovered forest and who made it a actor in their lives. In around 1800, they imagined an idyllic, supposedly primordial realm where they could explore their Seelenzustände or soul state, which was the supposed original. Even though primeval forests no longer existed, landscapes or landscape poetry at the desk was new, and it gave an illusion that worked, and it was not about ideology and biology. Eichendorff and the Romanticists considered this an emotional relationship with forest, which they used as a resonance space, and that gave them reconciliation. In the second half of the 19th century, please allow me to take this leap in time, there was a link to the national. We heard about the liberation wars in Europe against Napoleon and the many landscape in Germany where there was a longing for the strong unified Germany. And it was obvious that after the battle in the Teutoburg forest, and Hermann and the Karask was seen as somebody who defeated Varus in the year 9 after Christ and established a new national myth. And this was already some strange of a German cult where people imagined that these forest qualities gave a space where this world power of Romans could be defeated. Johannes Zechner described this as a story from Sylvan poetry to Sylvan policy as a social longing, societal longing for strength and power, and the belief that landscape can strengthen humans to master crises, forests as means to master crisis, and the interaction between humans and nature in these periods of major social upheaval. So these movements, or the romanticisms, are analyzed today in their effect today, so they help defining nature as worthy of protection and saving the environment. No, it's not the other way around. The first actors in forests were always those who were in search of material resources. This was the reason to go to the forest. It was not just for joy and enjoyment. It was the different professions which we already heard about this morning. So the different forms of use from forests, from wood was not just construction material. It also brought energy for glass production and shipbuilding. Different types of forests and timber were used. And the gigantic trees, the so-called Dutch firs, were cut, and also other types of use. And many other professions also found their place. For example, forest workers or honey gatherers who collected honey, which is the picture in the middle. So long before early industrialization, there was an intensive forest use that led to overuse, which was already visible from 1700 onwards. And the resource crisis set in later, and Professor Uekerter and others who are much more experienced than I studied this, but the sustainability discourse originated from concerns about forests. And this is the same as we saw it in earlier times. And Saxon mining expert Hans-Karl von Karlowitz had a solution how to solve this. Use from the Silvicultura Economica was published in 1713, where the term of sustainability found a new scale that is still characterizing forestry today. At that time, it was quite a revolutionary view of nature, this use of timber resources of a forest to calculate this. It was not a romantic view of the forest. It was a purely economical approach. And similar to Enlightenment, it was a reason-driven and efficient-oriented planning of wood harvesting. In the 18th century, the forest is discovered as a place that must be surveyed and opened up. It was surveyed, and the owners and lawyers organized it with laws in order to manage this. After overuse by cutting and erosion, cameralism applies public administration. Forestry offices require new bureaucratic structures, management, forestry institutions, and we call it still today forest inventory. And this includes geometrization into equally sized lots and age classes, and paths were created, and the entire science was professionalized. So in 1765, Hans Dietrich von Santier in Elsburg founded the first private forestry school, and Johann Heinrich Cotter, shortly after in Targand, established the Royal Saxon Forestry Academy, and in Eberswalde shortly thereafter, which are still today institutions that are internationally recognized. At the same time, a new view of landscapes occurs, which is a more... Here we see the evening painting by Caspar David Friedrich. We see an age class forest. All the trees are of the same age. They are there's almost no vegetation on the ground.
Hiding up.
No small trees can be seen. It is a nightmare for ecologists. Sustainable management means here that mass profits are generated, but it works for Caspar David Friedrich. We see the evening light, and this can also be a place for religious and a place which we celebrate still today. And all this is second-hand nature, as Hans-Georg Küster put it, geobotanist from Göttingen, who died just recently, much too early. So the Enlightenment and industrialization changed the world. They demystify it and make the world flight to wood flight, as we see it in the blonde Eckhart, and the blue flower of Ludwig Tieck is also found here, and by Novalis. And all this is found in the forest that heals us of the turbulences of modernity. In Frankfurt, Friederike Mittelhoff, Roland Borgertson research on the key word of romantic ideologies. And I have some hints from this project, including, for example, the female romanticists. Here, for example, a poem by Sophie Friederike Brentano. Poor tree, bound fast on your cold wall, you stand there sad, and scarcely feel the sea fear that with sweet showers lingers in the leaves of free trees, and but lightly hurries over yours. Oh, your sight touches me, and fantasy, rich with images, soon raises with its fleeting magic a human figure before me, forever removed from the free spirit of nature, by an alien force, compelled like you into rigid forms. The poem was written before 1800, so in the Jena, it is still part of the Jena early Romantic. A compelled tree as somebody who suffers, as someone who offers like us. We found the same with Bettina von Arnim, who took parts of the trees into her living space. She researched moss and small trees and studied them in a subjective, sympoetic fashion, recording the results in her letter. She also examined how humans and plants communicated resonance space at home. This may be some way of taking possession of trees and forests where it's not so easy to go into the forest and into the open. But nevertheless, it is a space of possibilities that can be used, and that was formerly open only to the male representatives of Romanticism. In addition to timber, another resource got under pressure, and this is the incalculable. Enlightenment opened up the forests, and it was no longer invisible, but its size and its borders were precisely defined. Natural laws applied here, objective scales can be applied. It was a change in mentality, and ideologically designed areas were forests were demystified. So the result, the forest had already been defined in the Middle Ages when Tristan and Isolde in the love grotto fled the laws. Forests were no longer incommensurable, but it remained a place of storage for the dark. And if the interest of the intellectuals in the dark forest tales, so that was a consequence of social treatment of forests. It was a counter movement to the masses. The Grimm brothers, marketed these stories, and they collected these stories in the fairy tales where we find worlds that have long since disappeared, would have long since disappeared unless they were written down. sources were often market people, Huguenot of Huguenot origin, and they often got their sources from France, and they were told to the Grimm brothers. They were handed down over thousands of years. They were unaffected by progress and change, and the forests were depicted to be similarly ancient. They are portrayed as dark and dangerous places as they were depicted before Enlightenment. So they represented the irrational. We find archetypical contents where death, incest, and child murder is seen. And all this belongs to the discovery of the immaterial value of forest, where the economy has everything that marks an opposition. All this belongs to the paradoxons of forest, that it is used as a projection surface for the nice and the less nice, for brutality and poetry, fear and longing, danger and the beautiful and the nasty, just like Redcap in the forest who meets the wolf, and Hansel and Gretel who meet the witch, and so forth. So we can say that professionalization in the forest also has some kind of expropriation, where a counter movement is created. We see once again a protagonist in the self-appropriation of forest, and this is the Schinderhannes' fiancée. She was sentenced not to death because it was said that only due to the bad influence of Schinderhannes brought her to the wrong places. It is about expropriation of forest, which Achim Allmann described in 1888, but also a counter movement that occurred. This delegitimization of forestry, as we see it today, is still effective in our romantic understanding of nature, in the hope that nature continues to offer this resonant space of demystification, that it could still offer this, a world that could make us healthy and happy. And the forest and the forest kindergarten are also synonyms of this, and the fascination of for paintings by Caspar David Friedrich confirm this powerful pattern as a realm of freedom, as an area of protected space. So what is the contribution of artists when designing the modern thinking? And this is a new concept in intellectual history, this so-called eco-criticism. So what effect does the separation of nature and culture have through romanticism? For example, when it comes to protecting the ecosystem, or the other way around, what can be the damage from aestheticization for the collective resources? So the strategies of romanticists to elevate the landscape to something new can also be seen critically. So we all witnessed Villa Wohlleben with his book, The Secret Life of Trees, that fundamentally changed ecological thinking, but that equated landscape to people, to beings that exercise solidarity and who have ideological properties and characteristics which we would like to have for ourselves. But at the same time, it also leads to a devaluation of other natural forms which are not only far away from forest, just as Wohlleben and others would like to see. Jolvenetzke said that it is some kind of destruction of resources because the natural forms are suppressed as we have it in cities, the wilderness next door. This is something which is devalued. And as a result of this, urban dwellers can no longer witness these resonance experiences, which Hartmut Rosa talks about, who says this resonance can no longer be experienced in cities where nature was also a resource, but it's no longer primeval forest. So this natural space no longer has a value, but nevertheless the value continues to be a stock which is often quoted. For example, when we quote the forest lonesomeness, and especially foresters today who suffer from the many visitors refer to this. So this use of romantic resources of forests, so they are subject to permanent criticism from the media, and their work must be more and more justified. But this criticism are new narratives of loss, which once again recharacterize the experience of forests, what we think to find about forests, what we wish. All this tells more about ourselves than about the landscapes. So the landscape continues to be a place of longing that gives us many insights. Says, what you shout into the forest echoes back to you. This is an old German saying. Thank you very much.